those of you who have watched my channel for a while will remember back, I think it was like June or July of last year, 2023, I bought these Pritikin books. Now, I actually bought one more. I haven't read it yet. And I decided yesterday, I just really didn't know what to do with myself, and I had remembered that I had bought this book. So I've already reviewed this book, this Diet and Exercise by the Pritikin Program. Now, this book came out in 1979. This book came out in 1983. Strangely, I was alive when this came out. It's so strange to think about. And the one thing that I have to say about this book is it's kind of strange. It really is kind of strange. I liked this book 100% better. So if you're watching this just to know which antiquated 19,000-year-old book to buy, if you can find it, I found these on Thrift Books. This is definitely the one I would buy, but I did want to go over this one a little bit. I wanted to talk about the consistencies that I see with in both of the books. I wanted to talk about some things that kind of shocked me, even though certain doctors would have been around at this time, and a couple other things. So let's get started. And one thing that you should note, that if you do buy this book, or if you have this book, over half of this book, I'm looking where it starts here. Over half of this book is basically hand-holding you through the program. Now, if you want something like that, I'm trying to find the end of this here. If you want something like that, all right, so this, you see the size of this book, and this portion of the book is basically to start rating your stuff, to start writing your numbers down, and then the majority of this book is going to be recipes. Now, I was surprised at how many of the recipes are not even remotely vegan. Almost all of them have raw turkey. You know, you're obviously going to cook it, but like raw turkey, raw chicken, raw beef. You know, it's a lot of animal stuff in this book. There's even low skim fat milk. I mean, so it's not vegan by any stretch of the imagination. It's just low fat, low protein. So that is the guide that he follows in both of the books. He talks about how in this book he talks about the idea of balance. I probably should have marked these books out before I started this, but I did not. But one of these the food balancing here. He talks about how food balancing is absolute nonsense, that our diet should consist at least 80% of carbohydrates, because that's the one thing that we really don't have a very good ability to store. The majority he talks about in this book. This book is actually good if you have people who don't really believe any of this, like the vegan or vegetarian life is good for you. This book is perfect for that. So if you can find this book and you have non-believers in your life, he definitely breaks it down in the beginning of this. It's kind of like he put what you would put at the back of the book in the beginning of the book, and what you would put in the beginning of the book at the back of the book. But he talks about all the studies and all, how it helps the blood system, and how it helps reduce your heart disease issues, and how by the time most people are 20 years old, their arteries are from somewhere between 20 and I think he said 70% clogged already, depending on what diet you ate. American, and especially if you look at India right now, they're using a lot of ghee, they're using a lot of oil, they're using a lot of coconut fat in things like that. So that's causing a lot of artery clogging. Now, obviously, he wasn't talking about India back then, but he did mention the Asians and actually the Indians Indians from India back then, as how they ate very low fat. You know, if I could find the one he compared, there was these doctors that did this huge study, and they're the ones that found that the average 20-year-old has 20 to 70% blockage. But then they did also a study in Japan. I don't know exactly where it is. They also did the same study in Japan from people ages 20 to 30, and they had almost no blockages of any. And this is at the time, 1983. Well, this would have been done prior to 1983. This had been done late 70s, probably early 80s. This is when you saw the Asian countries still eating primarily high carb, low fat. It's because that's what they could afford, but it also allowed them to live so much better lifestyle than we can, even though they had, well, not Japan, but like China and a couple of other countries had a lot less money. They were, healthier than we are. Japan has had, Japan has done well for itself, but they even still then, even though they were doing well for themselves, they had very good health because they ate very low fat, like 18% was the highest that they found in Japan. And I do know that in the 80s, especially like from 85 to now, is when dairy really started being introduced into Japan, because they really started getting fancy ice cream parlors and stuff like that. So some of that has, gone downhill since this book was written. The one commonality between both of these books is this dude loves potatoes. Potatoes. He basically says potatoes can be eaten for every single meal ad libitum, however much you want. He also is a huge fan in both of the books with whole wheat pasta. I don't know if he had any contact with what was it, Dennis Burkitt, I think, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, or I think it was his name, who was a missionary that went over to Africa and saw that the African people were not having any kind of health issues that the Western people were having. And the biggest commonality over in Africa was that they were having 100 to like 300 grams of fiber a day. Now, they weren't eating raw diets. They were just eating high fiber diets, whether that was corn, whole wheat, regular wheat, whatever they were eating. It had a lot of fiber in it. And even Burkitt, I watched one of the interviews I think he did with McDougall, I think it was, and he was talking about like one of the best things you can do for yourself is basically eat an entire loaf of whole wheat bread a day. Now, wheat has gotten tricky because it is GMO now. Like back when this book was written, the GMO stuff really wasn't around at that time, so it was a lot different. Potatoes, I think, are still the mainstay of what you could do. The one confusing part of the book, in both of the books, he talks about fruit. If your triglycerides are 125% or higher, not to eat any fruit. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think this triglyceride thing is a little bit much, because when I've looked into it in the past, when you have sugar, when you start having a high carbohydrate diet, and he didn't really talk about this, maybe he knew this, but he just didn't talk about it. When you start having a high carbohydrate diet, your body starts dumping out some of the stored fat that it had, because it's not storing as much, or if anything, anymore. And that's when the triglycerides are going to be in the blood system. So if they are high, it's probably because you're eating a high carbohydrate diet. And I don't know if he understood that, if the knowledge wasn't around then, or what, but that is my understanding of it from reading everything that I've written. And no, I'm not going to link all the studies down below. It's just not going to happen, largely because I don't feel like finding them again. I've probably done videos about them, so you can go look for that. One of the things that he talks about in both of the books is the idea of exercise. Now, his idea of exercise is basically walking, running, or riding bike. That is his exercises that he likes to talk about. He also likes to talk about heart rate, the age thing. I'll put this up here so you can do your own calculations based on that. So I'll leave that up there for a couple seconds so you can kind of jot that down about what heart rate you want to train at. Planning your exercise program, just different things that you can do here. But yes. So what to expect each week. I mean, I'm reviewing a book that doesn't even really exist anymore, but you can get it if you really want to get it. And it's just basically the Pritikin program. And he talks about how exercise largely gets rid of depression. It largely increases your metabolism. It largely allows you to uptake the food that you eat more readily. So while the calories being burned really isn't that significant, the amount of food that you actually process and metabolize is significantly different, significantly higher than it would be if you weren't doing exercises. So that's If you watch the video, I think it was actually the last video that I released about just eating a very minimal diet. That way it keeps you from overthinking about what you're actually going to be eating. One of the things that he talks about is, and I talked about how exercise, the calories, like if you really calculate the amount of calories that you burn during exercise, it's not that significant. But the changes in the body that you see from metabolism increasing and your food uptake increasing and the body composition changing with it. Now, he does talk about that in this book. So if you've heard about body composition being changed, so basically what happens is fat is kind of flubbery and much bigger per pound than like a pound of muscle is much more slender and smaller than a pound of fat. It's kind of like a pound of brick is smaller than a pound of cotton. Okay, so he talks about your body as you go through this phase. You might not even see a weight decrease at all, but you will see a noticeable increase in visible muscle through the fat layers that you have. So one of the things that you might want to do is take measurements around your waist, measurements maybe around your hips, maybe measurements around your chest, and a couple other measurements, maybe around your neck, and see how those change, because those are going to be more of an indicator of weight loss in a lot of cases than the weight on the scale. So he talks about that. And he also talks about the more exercise you do, the less likely you are to actually store fat, because it'll actually be able to burn it. Which to me already says that this is going to mean that there's going to be more triglycerides in your blood system. So I don't know why he didn't put 2 and 2 together with that one. That one really doesn't make any sense to me. I do believe I've talked about that. It was a McDougall video. If I can find it, I'll link it in the corner here. But it is a good book. It is a good book. Now, if I had to choose, like I said at the beginning of this, between these two, I would definitely get this one. But the exercise program and the hand-holding on this, maybe he knew, what generations were going to be coming. The hand-holding on this one is definitely there comparatively to the other ones. Yeah, I mean, but the one thing, a couple of the things that he talks about, and he's got a lot of testimonials in the beginning of this book, which are good if you really care about that things. He also talks about if you already are an athlete, what you should be eating. The one thing that is confusing about both of these books is he talks about you can eat as much of these foods as you want to, but then he also at the same time says you might want to do the 50-50 plate, basically. So, the 50-50 plate is, if you like, the first recipe in this book is whole wheat pasta, zucchini, and a couple other vegetables with marinated beet, on top. And he says if you're really looking to lose weight fast, then you would do like half the pasta and the rest would be the vegetables and whatever bolognese sauce or whatever sauce that you made. And yes, he does have a bolognese sauce. It's like the third recipe in there. So I guess if you really wanted to do that, you can use the fake meat or whatever. So he does talk about doing a 50-50 plate, even though he says that you can eat as much of this food that you want to and you're still going to lose weight. So that is an inconsistency that you see with almost every single one of these plant doctors. It's even in, I'm pointing over here, I got a bookshelf, Neil Barnard's book about not cutting calories, because counting calories really screws up your metabolism. But then in like a couple pages later, he says if you want to eat as much as you want, but want to lose weight faster, to cut or to do the 50-50 plate. And I'm it's confusing when you read these books when they talk about this stuff and then they're like, oh yeah, well you can do this. Like I wish it would just exclude it altogether. I don't get that. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is he absolutely hates sugar. And I'm not talking about like sugar and donuts. Like I'm talking like straight up sugar. And I don't know why, because he would have known about Dr. Walter Kempner and how much success Dr. Walter Kempner had with his patients. So why he hates sugar so much, and if you're an anti-sugar person, I've talked about sugar with Georgi Dinkoff. I will, if I remember, link his website. If I don't, it's just Haidut, HAIDUT.me, and you can go look. I mean, there's hundreds of sugar studies on there that use just either sugar or candy with no fat in it, and the amount of health benefits that it causes. So I'm not sure why he's so anti-sugar. He says some stuff about it, and I can't even remember because I kind of just blocked it out because it just, it just looks ridiculous to me. But anyways, that is my review of the Pritikin program based on both books. I do have one more book over there, but I actually think it's just this book in a smaller format. So I'll check that out. If it is not the same book, maybe I'll read that, and in 2 years from now, I'll review that one. So anyways, that is the video. That is the Pritikin program. Basically, minimal 80% carbohydrates, preferred from potatoes and whole wheat. And he doesn't really mention sweet potatoes at all in this. So I don't know, but potatoes is his thing. Grain, is his thing. Legumes is his thing. And to keep fat and protein as minimal as possible. He said that the FDA allowance of, I think it's 44 grams a day for protein for women, and I think it's 56 grams a day for men, is actually double what we should be having a day. Fat, he doesn't talk about grams of fat as much as protein. Protein, he says, and I've said this in many videos, when you eat excess protein, the toxic byproduct from it is so devastating to the body that it actually starts breaking the body down. That is a total no-no. So fat is actually preferable in this case to protein, but this protein craze is just, it's crazy. Crazy. Anyways, that's the video. Any comments, questions down below? Like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.